Hey, welcome everybody to Autonomous. So this is going to be an interesting panel where we'll talk about how to build teams that ship robots. And I know there are a lot of founders and builders in the room. This is a problem and a challenge everybody has faced. It's somewhat challenging to ship a robot that works in a demo, and it's a whole lot of problem to ship a fleet of robot that works reliably for the customer and keeps the customer satisfied. So I have 3 experts from diverse industries that will share their experience, and maybe we can take a learning or two from these people who are much ahead in the journey and apply to our work as well. So we have Maibui from Quarter 20, Safi from Simbe Robotics, and Reed from Shinkei Systems. So we'll start with the intro. So myself, Rishabh Agarwal, I am CTO at Raise Robotics. We make autonomous robots for heavy industries. So imagine a golf cart-sized robot with robotic arm, and that's installing facade installations, doing the layout marking, quality control, or doing drilling on construction sites, manufacturing, and shipbuilding. I have around 8 years of experience building autonomous robots. Prior to this, I was building robots that would harvest berries autonomously. So it's been a space I have been in for 8-9 years, and I've seen the evolution of this interphysical AI space. So let's start with you, Reed.
Thank you. My name is Reed Ginsberg. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Shinkei Systems. We today have a team of over 60 engineers between field engineering, software, and mechanical, designing robotics for the commercial fishing industry. So we have to make robots work in this tough maritime industry, but we also operate and own a food manufacturing facility, so we're designing robots in a manufacturing environment. And before this, I was the lead of Starship Avionics, so I worked at SpaceX designing avionics for harsh environments there.
Nice. Let's move on to you, Jerry.
Hi, my name is Jerry. I work for Simbe Robotics. Simbe is a retail robotics company, and our flagship product is Tally that goes into retail stores and scans shelves using essentially camera images. And my team, I lead the AI and computer vision team that's responsible for analyzing those pictures and actually creating the output that's necessary. We have about 40 engineers total across computer vision and AI and robotics, perception, data, analytics, and our web platform. I'm involved in a lot of the hiring decisions and I've grown up with the company. I've been with the company for about 10 years. I started off as an intern at this company, so have a reasonable view into how we've grown and hired people that can really survive the environment of a robotic startup.
Mike.
Hi guys, my name's Mai. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Quarter 20. What I've seen throughout my career as a mechanical engineer and across all of our customers is it takes a village to build a hardware product. And what we've seen across that is that it is extremely challenging for all these different teams, all these different functions to collaborate and communicate. So that's what we're solving at Quarter 20. Quarter 20 is a CAD-connected wiki or a place where you can create documents that tie into CAD so that when designs update that are built in Quarter 20, they automatically update your documentation, and every team and every all information can seamlessly flow.
Nice. So let's kick off the panel. The first question I would like to ask, how do you think about, when you're thinking about building team or hiring, how do you go about thinking, how many people you need, and how do you go about hiring those people? And one important hot take from each one of you, what are the credentials you are that doesn't matter to me when looking at hiring people? So Jerry has a smile on his face, so let's start with Jerry.
Do you want me to start with what credential I don't care about?
No, let's start with how do you think about hiring? How many you need for your problem statement?
Yeah, so it gets kind of interesting because as you're growing, obviously you want to be able to throw bodies at the problem. Oftentimes when we're thinking about growing, it's a combination of we have money that we can actually afford to spend, and we have a need that we need to fill. And so some of the things that I'm usually thinking about is how many people am I going to hire, and how are we going to absorb them? Especially as in a growing team, it's so important to be able to not hire more than you can actually support in a meaningful way. And then I really want to think about am I hiring people that I'm going to be working on training more, or am I hiring people that are going to own a lot of things themselves and sort of support me? Like, how much are they going to be able to support me specifically, or the other people in the organization, and how much can the existing engineers that I have support the newcomers versus how much energy is it going to require from me specifically? So that's an important consideration. In terms of what kind of credentials I'm looking for, we're entering this weird time when credentials are starting to matter less and less. But to me, that was kind of always the case. A little bit of an example for me, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, actually. And I was working in a robotics lab doing a master's. And I was doing some programming, but I wasn't a computer scientist by trade. And I was hired into a role to do work that was more around computer science. And the CTO at Simbe, Mirza Shah, he kind of taught me a lot of the computer science that I know now. I knew a lot of the fundamentals, but I wasn't particularly, really exceptional at it. But that kind of showed me that it didn't quite matter that I didn't have the background. What mattered was what I was willing to learn, how I was willing to grow, and how many problems I was willing to tackle myself and make myself an expert in. And so I really look for a lot of that. Like, obviously, I'm going to look for credentials. I'm going to be looking for people that have done some amount of work in computer vision, some amount of work adjacent to programming and AI. But I've also hired people that have done none of that work. I've hired people that have done none of that work into, in one example, I hired this person into a QA team. And we spent a year, he did excellent work for the QA team. And in that time, we kind of gave him a little bit of time, and I spent some time with him just training him up on the expertise that were necessary until he was up to the task and actually could join our team. And that was, one of my best employees. And it's so much easier, I feel, to do that now because of the explosion of language models and how much they can be used for instruction and to bootstrap a person into a role that maybe they haven't really trained for, but they have a real interest in.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So while I'm hiring people, now what I'm seeing more of in especially robotics is the cost of making a mistake is much more higher in hardware space than it is in the software space. So it's not really possible to learn from your own mistakes. So you need to hire people who have been there, done that in some domain and can bring in information, not just intent, but bring in existing information that is org does not have or people in the org does not have. And how can we avoid that problem from even happening, let alone solving that problem when we get to it? So hiring people who have seen 0 to 1 journey and now can replicate it at my org is something that I have personally seen work much better for our org. So moving on to Reed, how has your experience been hiring, and what are the credentials that don't matter to you?
Yeah, I think it's credentials, but at the same time, I think you really don't know someone until you speak with them and you see what they're looking for in their adventure of their career. You want somebody who's hungry to join a startup and is it's okay if they come from a big company. Like, I come from aerospace at SpaceX, where sometimes you'd see Lockheed Martin or Boeing on a resume and immediately push it to another pile, where to me, as long as that person is saying, I'm bored at my job and I want to go faster, I want to push myself and learn, that's okay if if they have some boring company that they are not as excited about, as long as in their personal growth they are yearning for more. And then the grit side of being in a hardware company, to your point, you're going to see a lot of things fail. Most things are going to fail, and you have to have the grit to keep going and push through that. So for us, it's about finding people that are mission aligned. So for us, we make money selling the best fish in the world, not hardware. So we want people who really care about food, who have a passion for either cooking or giving people better access to high quality food, but they also have a skill set in hardware and they can add value to the company. So early on, I think you're still trying to pivot and figure out maybe what your business is. As long as you find the right people and you have the right people on the bus, they can do different jobs for you. So for me, it's more so try to meet as many people as you can, bring them in to meet your team, and find them at the right part of their life.
What are the credentials you looked at earlier and you were like, now that doesn't matter to me at all?
Yeah, to me, I think maybe a PhD used to be more valuable, whereas today I think just going and getting to a startup or being on your Formula SAE team in college where you have real projects that you have to build something and be in a cross-functional team where you disagree with other people's opinions on your team but have to argue for it, or that cross-functional nature is what I'm looking for, whereas I think in isolated research, you're not getting pushed as hard and you can be isolated, which building products in the real world is a very teamwork-driven project.
Yeah, I totally think like having some work done on a project teaches you a lot more than any book can teach, right? Like hands-on work, especially with the hardware side. What are your takes, Mai, on this topic of like hiring and how to hire and build teams?
I think at the end of the day, you just want someone that's willing to get their hands dirty and someone that has the grit to actually go and try and get their hands dirty. And it doesn't matter if they're super junior, it doesn't matter if they did all of this, throughout 10 years of experience. You want someone that is, willing to understand why did something go wrong, figure out what that was, figure out how do you fix it, and then figure out how do you make sure that it never goes wrong in the field again. And so something that I like to ask people during interviews is like, what's a problem that kept you up until 2 a.m. at night? And I don't care what kind of story they tell, but I want them to be able to have the experience of they cared enough, they were passionate enough about solving a problem that they were able to figure out, sort of like dive into why that was the case. They cared enough and they were curious enough to want to dive deep into the problem, and that they're capable enough to go in and actually solve the solution and present a viable solution to it. So that's kind of what I care about the most. And I think when you go on LinkedIn, you see a bunch of people that are like, oh, I've met some pretty ridiculous people. Someone that I met was like, oh, I only hire people that are former athletes in college or Olympians because, they show true grit. Or someone was like, oh, I only hire people from top 10 schools because, I don't know, maybe they validated that person one way or another. And I think those are stupid metrics because that does not have any bearing on how they will perform in a role. And what I think matters the most is that you find someone, you can find someone that didn't go to college, but tinkered all day long. And you just want to find people that really care, that dive deep, and are able to communicate what are the problems and what are the solutions.
So yeah, I totally agree with that. Intent has to be first. Even if it's a smart person, has a lot of experience, but the intent is missing, then nothing will click in. How to get people to have that intent and to motivate them to go dive deeper is the crux of it all. Yeah.
So, not going to talk about what credentials I wouldn't be looking for or wouldn't care about, but kind of building on that, one of the things that I've found after reviewing thousands of resumes is so often, especially when you're hiring for computer vision and AI or robotics, we'll find people that have they've obviously done some course, some sort of certification or something like that, and all you find on these resumes, resume after resume, is I am 100% sure this was a homework assignment. This was a homework assignment. Yeah, you did behavioral cloning for a car. I did too when I took that Udacity course 10 years ago. What is something that you were really interested in? So this idea of tinkering, it's every time somebody asks me what do you look for in a resume, it's the most valuable thing is I want to see your personality shine through, in that you went out and I don't know, did something for yourself that was really interesting to you. And one of my recent hires was somebody who maintains a website for their ancestral language that a few thousand people speak. That was immediately super interesting to me. It has nothing to do with computer vision. It has nothing to do with robotics, but that shows that you had the interest to go and build something out for yourself and tinker. And that's more valuable, I think, than I wrote an algorithm for doing A star. It's okay, fine. Claude can do it too.
Yeah, I think that is the thing. Now I'm seeing people are putting more and more these jargon words in their entire resume and forgetting to put less and less their personality into the resume. They are I can do this, and then it's name dropping companies I've worked at or certificates or schools. So totally agree with you. Like that does not show the intent and the personality of the person you're hiring. And at the end, you're working with people, so personality matters a lot. So let's dive deeper. Reed, you have a lot of experience in working in a very difficult terrain, saltwater, fishes, a lot of diversity over there. So how do you think about hiring people, and like, what is that one role you felt you were like, okay, I should have hired this role far earlier and my life would have been so much better?
Yeah, so we design robotics that are in a maritime environment. We have a robot, it's really looks like an industrial machine that goes on the deck of commercial fishing boats. So there's a ton of corrosion, vibration, radiation, thermal changes throughout the day in a remote area. We need hardware to survive all of that environment, obviously. So it's a little bit different than some of the robotics that I've seen today, where you can be in an ambient environment. And for us, we need to find people who have tried to design to that environment before. There's a lot of aerospace on our team. We pull from vehicle engineering and automotive as well. So some of those problems have been solved. However, working with live fish and live animals is very difficult, and they each have a mind of their own. And I think I would say the last thing is somebody who is looking for a challenge. As a hardware engineer, the harsh environments make aerospace difficult, and that's what makes designing hardware at Shinkei fun and exciting, is you constantly have these ever-evolving problems that draw people into working at your company.
Nice. So Jerry, you work in a very diverse environment where your problem statement might be changing, like boxes on the shelves are changing, lighting is changing, glare on the product, and you are working on the AI and the CVML side of things. So like, how do you look at it from the hiring side? Like, what roles can you do to increase the reliability of your product?
Yeah, so not necessarily in specifically the type of examples that you were giving, but we have definitely gone out and looked for subject matter experts before in specific really, really difficult problems. So one of the most difficult problems that we actually solve has less to do with machine learning or AI and more to do with just reconstructing what the shelf looks like using the data that we're capturing. And a lot of that is we're still doing it with traditional methods because that's the most cost-effective way to get a good outcome. So the one time that I went out specifically looking for a subject matter expert was for that problem. And we found a really awesome PhD that had just finished her PhD and was looking for a job. And did not have a lot of programming expertise, had a very research focus. That was once we hired her, within a couple months it was clear we were all just guessing on how to create a well-functioning scalable product, and she understood the problem so well, because that was most of what she did for her thesis. She came in and kind of just built an excellent system that has stood the test of time since then. So that's one person that going back to the previous thing that you were asking, I really wish I had hired this person. Maybe we should have found somebody like that even sooner. Ops is another one. So when we talk about how do you build a system that's going to be extremely resilient, that's partly a data problem, partly an algorithm design problem, and partly a scale problem. And the scale problem is possibly the most difficult, I think, because I feel like making robust neural nets we know a lot about it. It's gotten very mature. But getting to the point where we can effectively make use of data at scale to continuously monitor drift, to know when to upgrade the models and when a model is working well or not, you really need somebody that has that mindset of setting up these systems to do that. And so we very recently hired somebody to do ML ops. Prior to that, again, we were doing a lot of the work ourselves. Not a lot of us were very good at making effective use of cloud resources. And we brought this person in that had some amount of expertise before, not in our area, he hadn't done anything with computer vision, but he had the expertise in the ops side of things, and he had a real interest in learning more about computer vision and getting sort of better at that. And that made a big difference as well we had existing systems that were already robust, but actually getting to the point where we could have peace of mind that they're going to continue to stay robust as we expand from like a small number of customers, thousands of robots across dozens of customers. That was a super important role.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Mai, you see a lot of hardware companies from like a bird's eye view. What are the things that hardware companies are doing wrong, and you're like, these are the things and the problems they're not anticipating or hiring for? If they were to fill these roles, then their life would be so much easier and they will achieve their, targets much easily.
I think a hardware company is like a big group project where everyone thinks that, if person A takes, the intro, and person B takes this, and person C takes this, and person D takes the conclusion, and then we'll slap it all together at the very end, like, we'll have a great paper. The equivalent in hardware would be, one team takes mechanical engineering, one team takes electrical engineering, one team takes, supply chain. We slap it all together and we'll be able to build this project. And that's not actually what happens. What happens is you have this massive Frankenstein that doesn't actually work because nothing is properly integrated together. And that's something that I've seen kind of across my career, but also across all the companies that use Quarter 20. It's that everyone is siloed in their own division. And the number of times that I've heard manufacturing engineers say mechanical engineers just throw things over the fence to manufacturing, or electrical says, I just keep on asking for, I just keep on bothering the design team to send me over information. Like, that's not what will make teams work. What really makes teams work is the flow of information across teams and creating a system that allows them to share data and share data effectively. So I'd say that the number one thing that people don't think about early on is thinking about systems and system integration and making sure that you have a pathway to validate that not just like the design works, but the design works in mechanical with the electrical, with the RF, with the whatever other systems that you have to make sure that you have a fully functional product.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like system integration, like everybody is doing their work, but a lot of work also gets wasted. Like somebody is doing work and that other person has already done or does not even matter anymore, and like it leads to inefficient work cycles. So in a similar vein, like if I take it even a notch above in robotics, what I've seen is this role of forward deployed engineer. I think like that's a very valuable role, and that helps this bridge the gap of like, what product should we build? What is the customer's real problem? Because there is a lot of assumption going into the product requirement document of like, what does the customer need? Customer does not understand what robot can do. Team does not understand the operations of customer. And that is the gap now this forward deployed engineer or whatever title you can give can help fill, or customer has facing these problems. And when we are building this product, it could be a tiny UI UX issue. So one such example is like we were deploying in construction sites, and the engineering team had UI UX in X and Y coordinate system. And the contractors on the site had a system of northing, southing, easting, westing, in which they were used to identify things. So they were not able to work with our UI UX the same way because we are speaking the engineering language and they are speaking the subcontractor language. So the forward deployed engineer was able to take that, see that understanding and give back to the team of like, hey, and that was like a 5-minute change. It's just changing the SI units of what we are displaying. And that changed the adoption and of like how easy it is for them to understand. So those are some of the learnings. Is there any other learnings you guys have identified on the system integration side?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you mentioned there. One, I'll talk about the forward deployed engineer. We call them field engineers. And then the other is the product. When we started the company, we were designing robots that we were trying to sell to fishermen and fish farms. A few months later, we pivoted to selling our product being fish. So we still designed the same robots, but actually we thought about, instead of making the most efficient robot as possible, how do we make sure we're measuring the quality, the flavor, shelf life of the seafood that we're making, and realized that's where the value was accruing. So over time, we built an entire seafood brand we call Ceremony Grade around that. So I think you have to constantly ask yourself, the product that you're making, where is the value accrue the most in the supply chain, and make sure you're measuring yourself constantly where that is. So that for us, that was the case. And then the other is our field engineering group. the question originally about like when to hire people, I think you don't want to hire a forward deployed engineer too soon because that may add barriers between the design folks and the customer. You want them to feel the pain of whether it's a manufacturing engineer throwing something over the fence or somebody designing something. You want them to feel the pain of that issue, and then eventually when it's like stable enough, I think you bring in forward deployed people to push it forward.
So we had forward deployed engineers before it was cool. And the reality is we don't have anyone at our company that we call a forward deployed engineer. We haven't hired somebody specifically for that role. But what we have done, I would say for at least 8 years at this point, is we've had engineers embedded in customer conversations. We learned that lesson early on because we realized that the abstraction that was happening from somebody from sales or strategy talking with the customer and bringing it back to the engineering team, we were losing. We were losing the context. We were losing what actually needed to be done or what the customer actually needed. And so I am very insistent now on like all of my engineers, they join customer calls, they talk to the customers directly, they go into the retail stores and actually see the workers work. There's no like specific role for that. It's just the culture. That's what we do. My robotics engineers, they'll go to the store and they'll watch the robot interact with people, and they'll sort of talk to the people that are working there, the customers that are there, to understand just beyond. Like we can get all the telemetry in the world, and we're not going to get the context that's necessary to really understand how the robot is interacting with its environment. And so, yeah, whatever you call it, actually having people always be close to the problem is always gonna benefit.
Yeah, exactly. So like that is part of building the culture in the company as well. And to your point, Reed, like what we have realized as well, we send these designers, software engineers on construction sites. And we are like, just go and see your product that you're doing. And once you see that tiny issue in your head, how does it get magnified when it gets to the customer side on 10th floor when it's freezing outside? Now how big of an annoyance it becomes, and the pain point when they feel it, their desire to solve that pain point is so much more than any product documentation can do. So the last tidbit from you guys that I need is like, you guys are all solving very tough problems and people will feel demotivated running into walls after walls. How do you maintain the retention of the company, as well as how do you ensure that the people remain motivated to solve challenges across years, not months? Let's go, Reed.
Yeah, I think there's something that I heard that stuck with me a few years ago, that people leave managers, not jobs. And I think as you grow your leadership team that's very close to you, I think ultimately it's up to those leaders to ensure their ecosystem of their small team, that they're really keeping a pulse on how people are doing and ensuring that, of course, the going gets tough and you're going to fail at something, but people are still growing in their careers. So I think that can be overlooked at a startup, but still you owe it to everybody at your company to make sure they're growing in their career technically and personally. So I think that's really, really important. And then, what I mentioned earlier about mission, make sure people are joining for the right reasons and that they can see the big vision 10, 20 years away. Like I joke that SpaceX was started to get to Mars and, they're 20 something years in and they're still not there, and they probably won't be for a while, but people have rode along the whole way and enjoyed it anyway.
Go ahead.
We don't have a lot of time. I'm just going to quickly go through this. Flexibility, ownership, respect, and safety. Those are the 4 things that I think are super important for having retention, and we have really good retention. I've been at Simbe for 10 years. I have engineers that have been there for like 6, 7 years. I, so far in my team, haven't had anybody quit. And it comes down to, we're incredibly flexible with how they're going to get their work done, when they're going to get their work done. It's going to be about the outcomes more so than when they're active. It's going to, everybody has extreme ownership of the things that they work on, and they have pride in what they work on, and we actually give them the ability to do that. However, the safety is really important. They got to have the backing of somebody that they trust. So from a leadership standpoint, all the leaders are, sort of clued into making sure that everybody feels safe in what they're doing. And then finally, respect. I feel like that's a no-brainer. I shouldn't have to explain it, but just having mutual respect and building that culture and making sure that everybody is on the same page is ultimately what keeps people around.
Let's get the final words from Mai.
I think it just comes back to make sure that you take the time to hire right the very first time. It's way easier to just take the extra, if you're on the fence about someone, ask them to come back for another 30 minutes. Ask someone else to get a second opinion. It's way easier to do that than it is to fire someone or have a pip talk or, go through the pathway of are they doing enough? Are they not doing enough? Let's evaluate this compared to other people. Just make sure that you hire right the first time.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys, for this panel. And we can call it here then, guys. Thank you so much.